Good evening, folks, and welcome to our Canadian Shield tutorial on how to run a congregational meeting through Zoom. And it's so nice to see everyone. Now that Sue's got your videos turned off, I can't see everyone, but it was nice to see your smiling faces as we were all coming on to the Zoom room. And I'd like to take this moment again to welcome you and to say thank you for taking time tonight to join with Sue, my colleague, Susan Whitehead, and myself, Melody Duncanson-Hales, as we try to work together. We're learning together, experimenting together, and playing together really tonight to learn some new tools in order to facilitate a general meeting together. So just a few housekeeping notes. As you've noticed, Sue has invited you all to turn your cameras off and to remain muted. However, there is a chat box that we'll invite you to use throughout the evening. If you have questions or comments, please definitely use the chat box. Because there's two of us facilitating tonight, we can keep an eye on that chat box, and we can share and we can invite you to speak and turn on your camera and your microphone if you have any questions or thoughts you'd like to share with the rest of the group. So we do have a PowerPoint for tonight, and I do want to mention as well that this session is being recorded. We will be posting it on the Canadian Shield website when it's ready. With the PowerPoint that we have tonight, there we go. It's included the agenda and our plan that was distributed already through the website, but I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on what we're doing. So we're right now we're gathering together. In a moment, I'll invite us to join in prayer together. We need a lot of prayer sometimes to get through this kind of learning. And now I'm going to be asking you some question. Do we actually need to meet? And what would be the best way to do that for you? Sue's going to take a look at how to set up Zoom to facilitate a meeting for your congregation. And I'll be talking a little bit about what you might need to do to prepare for this meeting. Sue will have a conversation about the different roles, and these are new roles, especially if you're facilitating a meeting through Zoom. This is not just a chair and a recording secretary. We will definitely need some other volunteers to be focused and to be working together to make the technology a success. We're going to look at some scenarios and some possibilities for how to vote, and we'll invite you to consider what would work best for your context. And Sue's going to lead us through sort of a technical what to know on your meeting day, so how to practice, what to rehearse for. And we'll see a sample video from Shining Water's general meeting. It's very similar if you participated in the Canadian Shield general meeting back in November. But this is a snippet for those who might not have seen the kind of voting that we've been talking about, how it's been available, and you can see how that was interacted with the Shining Waters folks. We'll open the floor to any questions that you might have, and then again, I'll invite us to close with prayer. So, I don't know, I think we're ready to start. So I'll invite Sue to light our virtual candle. I'm going to take a deep breath and invite all of us, in whatever space we're in, whatever place on this planet, in this region we are, just to take a moment and open our hearts and our minds to the one who is beyond time and space, who is as close to us as our next breath. Let's pray together. Jesus Christ, you call us. In the season of Epiphany, you call us together as your people. You have named us your friends. You invite us to follow you. And so your church grows from scattered homes in ancient times to a community that spans the globe, embracing humanity, old and young, from many different nations and cultures. In our time this evening, we pray that you will open our hearts and our minds to new learning, to wisdom discovered from your Spirit and from each other. Help us to be patient with others and with ourselves as our brains connect with new modes of learning in new ways of communicating. Help us to see the privilege that we share to be part of your people in this moment and across the ages and around the world. It's your love that keeps drawing us to you and to each other. And be with us tonight as we discover new ways to live your love in the world today. Amen. So, a very basic question. Do you need to have an annual meeting right now? And that's the first question that I'm going to invite all of you to consider. Do you need to have an annual meeting? Shortly, I think it was in the November meeting of the General Council Executive, there was an amendment to the manual that stated that the governing body has been given the governing body of every congregation, community of faith, has been given special authority by the General Council Executive to deal with urgent matters on behalf of the congregation. And this amendment allows communities of faith to postpone holding annual meetings and passing annual budgets. It also allows the governing body of the communities of faith to act on behalf of the congregation. This is a temporary measure that is going to be in effect until August 31st of 2021. Now, if there is a really strong reason why the governing body the congregation needs to meet, just remind folks that all the same protocols that you would have for a regular annual meeting would still be in effect. So publicizing the meeting date and the mode of the meeting, to do that in a timely fashion, 3 weeks consecutively before the meeting. And to do those normal things that you would do in preparation for an annual meeting. So having an annual report that's published and accessible to people before the meeting. And to really consider how you want to meet. So we're talking tonight about meeting via Zoom, but some congregations might be considering meeting over conference call, which we have some of the facilities in our region to support your congregation with. And maybe you're coming from a smaller congregation that could do a socially distanced meeting when the conditions to do so are safer. So tonight we're concentrating on online meeting through the Zoom platform. But the question, do you need to have an annual meeting right now, is a fair one. So we'll go to the next. Oh, and I do want to point out, I'm glad Susan stayed on this video, back on the slide. I do want to point out the web address that I have on this particular slide, the governance congregations during COVID-19. This is a download available from the United Church website. I'll make sure to get it into the chat before too long. But there is a whole document that outlines the steps required of congregations in order to have an annual meeting, to remember what the requirements are of meetings as a congregation, and to again invite congregation leadership to consider the specifics of what needs to happen. So I'll make sure that that's up. So we can move to the next slide. And just as we do, I just want to say I'm grateful for a general council that recognizes it is difficult to safely gather our communities the way that we have in the past. So we're hoping for in the future that it'll be safer to gather face to face, but until that happens, we do have some options.
Melody, I wondered if you could go to the participants panel and take yourself off Spotlight and add myself. I can't do that while I'm in this presentation.
Okay, let me see how I can do that.
Thank you. Okay, let's talk about setting up your Zoom accounts. You need to learn things like updating your Zoom account, the universal settings, scheduling meetings, registration within Zoom, and the security settings during a meeting. So I'm just going to stop my share. And Melody's going to add me, I think, as a spotlight, or I spotlighted myself. There we go. Perfect. Hi, everybody. So let me just share my screen here, and I'm going to move over to my Zoom. Here we go. I'm going to actually go here. So let's begin about your Zoom, updating your Zoom account. So Melody and I, just in preparing for this event today, we went into the back end of our Zoom account and realized, hey, there's a new update. And there's some pretty significant changes that were listed there. And it was interesting because one thing that we're going to talk about later when we do the voting, the place where you see the yes, no, raise your hand, it's no longer in the participants panel. It's been moved. So stay tuned for that. We'll talk about how that's moved later. Okay, so like I said, you have to check your Zoom account regularly for updates for the latest versions. So there are two ways that you can access your account. The first way is via the web portal. So that's using any way that you get onto the internet. You type in www.zoom.us and you'll get to the web portal. The second way is by opening up the Zoom app. So if you take a look at my screen right here, I have the Zoom app. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger so that you can see it. Okay, so here we go. I need to learn how to update. So you sign in, and as soon as you get into here, you will see in the top right-hand corner, you'll see your picture. It's your profile picture for your Zoom account. When you click on that, all of a sudden, you get a whole bunch of different options, and you click all the way down to check for updates, and a little box will appear, and it'll either say you are up to date, yay, or it'll say there's another version available and you are currently at 5.4.1. Click here to update your Zoom account. We've also learned by practice and by play that you cannot update your Zoom account while you're actually in a meeting. So a little note will come up and say, as soon as your meeting is over, you can update your account. Okay, so that is how you do it with the Zoom app. Some people will ask the question, how can you get the Zoom app? You have to go to the portal, which is here, the www.zoom.us, and then you can download it, okay? I'm not going to get into any of that. I can give you ways to do that later on. We've got quite a busy schedule here. Okay, so here we are, we're updated, and now we want to talk about the universal settings. So this is the way that I do it. I go into the web portal and I have my profile, which is here, and then I press meetings and it'll give me all the meetings that I have booked. And I'm going to go into how to schedule a meeting. But the more important piece right now is settings. So when you click on settings, you get these universal settings. And what I mean by universal is that these are the settings for your entire Zoom account. There's another set of settings, which is actually in the meeting, and I'll show you that in a little bit. So along the side here, under Meeting tab, it talks about security, it talks about basics of in the meeting, it talks about email notification, and if you saw that spin all the way down, there are a lot of settings. So I'm not going to go into any depth, but I do have some good news. Before I show you some pieces of this, if you go to the Canadian Shield Regional Council website, which is canadianshieldrc.ca, I'm sure you've all been there. I've made a page on the homepage that's called Online Congregational Meetings. When you click on that, it's going to take you to an annual congregational meetings page. And myself and Susie Henderson from Shining Waters Regional Council, we've been partnering to try to offer something for communities of faith who are doing their meetings. We have Zoom tip sheets, and we have links, and we have videos and tutorials. So for those of you who didn't go and see how to host a Zoom meeting, the Milk presentation that I was a part of in the fall, I highly recommend you do it. It's 2 hours, but the best part is it's recorded and you can just fast forward through things. But it really gets into the nitty-gritty of everything you ever wanted to know about hosting a meeting. This event tonight is more about having meetings and voting and that kind of thing. So I'd say this is step one, and then tonight is step two. And of course, as Melody said, we are recording this, and I'll post it right here in this empty space, and you can view it if we're talking too quickly or if some things you want to review. No problem at all. So that is on our website. So back to the Zoom settings. There are a bunch of things on that tip sheet. You'll see one that talks about settings. It's worth a read. It'll tell you some of the requirements that you absolutely should have, like allowing the chat. There's a button that says allowing breakout rooms. I had someone call me about 2 or 3 months ago and said, I don't think my account has breakout rooms. And I said, yeah, I think it probably does. You need to go and enable it in your settings. Okay, so this is the settings, and there are settings here that I haven't even touched on yet. Okay, so play around with it, check it out, read them, and look at the tip sheet about it. It's really good. So just finally, if you want to enable something, if it's grayed out, it is not enabled, but such as that. But when you click on it and enable it, it says automatically your settings have been updated. So it's really important to know that this isn't just for the meeting that you're in. This is like the universal settings. So there's one piece here that you might bypass, which I don't want you to bypass. It's the nonverbal. Let's see here. The nonverbal. Sorry if it's going quickly. Nonverbal feedback. So this is an important piece to click on. This is the piece that'll allow you to have the raised hand, the yes, the no, the go quicker, to go slower, that kind of thing. You definitely want that enabled, and we're going to talk about that. Melody's going to talk about that later when we talk about voting. Okay, so play with this, check it out, have fun with it. There's a lot of really cool things in here. Okay, so I have to go all the way back up to the top, and I'm going to go to meetings, and I'm going to schedule a meeting. So I go over here to the right, and I click on schedule a meeting. So in the topic, we're going to give it a title. Always give it a title so that you know, because otherwise it'll be my meeting and you'll have 10 my meetings there. Okay, so we're going to say my meeting is going to be called Canadian Shield Regional Council Test Meeting. Okay, if you want to put a description in here, you can, and I'll explain how that will show up later. We put it for today, and we're going to say 11:30 p.m. And remember to do this AM PM because I scheduled some meetings when I first started with Zoom, and I had them at 11 o'clock at night instead of in the morning. You figure out the duration, so I'm going to make it 2 hours long. Now, I'm going to talk about this registration later. So I'm going to leave that blank for right now, but these are the settings within your meeting. So you have your settings, like your universal settings that apply to every meeting, but this is for this meeting only. So I have to decide, and of course this is a new thing because of security, and they've had people, dive bombing Zoom meetings. They've gone and made it really, really tough to break into a meeting. So you can have a passcode, or you can have no passcode and just a waiting room. It's up to you. So when all of you came in, I had you in the waiting room. I didn't have you put in a passcode. You clicked on your link and you got in. Okay. Now, because we changed the universal settings for the host and participant video to always be on, it automatically comes up here. But let's say in this meeting, I don't want to have it on. I could click it off. Same thing with audio. In my universal settings, I have enabled to have both the telephone and the computer audio on because I have an account that has a toll-free number and the option for people to use the phone. So I want that enabled. And then I just take a look at these meeting options. Yeah, I want participants to join anytime. Do I want them muted upon entry? No, that's okay. Do I want to pre-assign the breakout rooms? No, because in this case, I don't have registration, so I can't. Automatically record the meeting. I think I have that in my universal settings. Approve or block entry, those kind of things. If you want an alternate host, you can put their name in. We haven't done a lot with this because I tried to put alternate hosts with someone outside of the United Church of Canada and it didn't work. So we'll play around with that and let you know. The language interpretation is for closed captioning as well. And then you press save. So then it comes up, it gives me a summary of everything that I did. I want to send people the link, but I don't just, personally, I don't just want to send this link. I want to go and copy the invitation. So when I click on copy the invitation, this lovely box comes up and I can copy the meeting information and then plop it in my email and send it out. So that's what I do when I send out scheduling these meetings. Okay, so let's go back to registration. So I'm going to go back to my meeting. So I'm going to take a look here and it says CSRC test meeting. I'm not going to start the meeting because we're in the meeting right now and I don't want to delete it, but I'd like to edit it. I can press edit here or I can click when it's highlighted right there. So here's the meeting. Oh, excuse me, I'm wrong. I should have pressed edit. I can do it again down here. Okay, so I changed my mind. I want to do registration. So I click on required and I press save for registration. So this is how you do registration in Zoom. So I'm going to press save and then you go all the way to the bottom here and all of a sudden this comes up. So it says manage registrants and registration options. Well, no one has signed up, so there's no one to manage right now. But I'm going to edit this. And you have a choice here to approve people, for them to be approved automatically or to manually approve. I highly recommend that you press manual approval. Otherwise, people will get the Zoom link automatically and you will have no control over that and you'll have no idea. Like if someone will get the link and then you'll have no control over that. So I personally would recommend manual approval. Next, I like to get an email letting me know who registered. So what happens is I've got a couple of events going on right now where people have registered, the LWL event and then the ministry personnel event. And what happens is people have applied and then I get an email and then I can go in and see who those people are. So we can choose to close the registration after a certain date, but I don't tend to do that because there are people who register right up within an hour of the meeting. Allow attendees to join from multiple devices. That's really important. And you can have these social share buttons if you want. And then you press save all. So when you send so then what I do is I take this registration link. Well, I do the copy invitation. So it's a little bit different than the one from before. It says, hi there, you're invited to join a Zoom meeting. To register in advance, click on this link. So I copy this invitation and I send it in an email, okay? And when people register, that's where the branding comes in. And if you want some more information about that, I can totally teach you, and maybe that will be another lesson that we'll do. You can upload your banner, a logo, if there's a special description. Remember when I talked about the description of the title back on this page? Let's say that I wanted to write that description in here. Sorry, I should have just stayed there. This is where when you do your branding page and you use registration, any information you want people to see on the registration page will be right here. Okay, so last thing about registration, I want to look at the questions that I want to ask people. So you can ask their first and last name. It automatically asks the first and last name and the email address. Those are two things that are absolutely required. Personally, I don't use anything else here. I think this is probably from the States. So this is where I come in here and say, okay, I'm going to ask my own questions on the registration form. So I'm going to say, what community of faith are you from? Question mark. And I press create. So I'm going to ask another question, but I want to have a multiple choice answer. So that one was short answer. They're going to write, you know, Trinity United Church in Thunder Bay, and that will be their answer. But here I have a question and I want a multiple choice answer. So this is where this will come in. So do you want more tutorials? Question mark. Yes, no, maybe. And if I wanted to have another short answer, like if I need to have more, I just keep adding more and more and more. And then you press create. And then I press save all. So then what happens is I can see my questions. When I click on custom questions, it tells me the 2 questions that I asked. So I can delete them, I can make new questions, I can alter it any way that we want. Okay. So
I'm just going to interrupt you quickly, Susan.
Yes,
we did have a question about why you would use registration. And I mentioned with this person that it's if you are wanting to keep an attendance record, that registration could be quite important to have that in advance. I know that in experience with congregations, oftentimes it's whoever shows up to the annual meeting because that's who was in church that day. And then you pass a clipboard around the room and everybody signs their name. Well, you can't pass a clipboard around a Zoom room. So this is just an ability to get people, first of all, committed to attending the annual meeting, but secondly, to get that attendance record going in advance.
Perfect. So the thing with using Zoom is that each person gets a unique link. The staff members here in Canadian Shield and in Shining Waters learned the hard way that you can't give the link out, you have to register. So that's, it's a little bit of a downside for registering with Zoom. You have to definitely register and then you get the link, and it's a unique link for each person. So I can go back, I can see each person when people register, I can make up groups for breakout rooms. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do with registration. You can export the list so I don't have to manually write down everybody's name. It's all there for me. I can export it into an Excel spreadsheet. I can manipulate that spreadsheet any way that I like. I like it. But having said that, you know, you might not want to do that. You might want to have someone maybe you're only having 10 people. Maybe you've got, I'm just going to stop sharing here now. Maybe you only have 10 people coming to your meeting and you want them just to send an email. And that's fine. So when they send you an email link, then you can just, they send you an email asking for registration. You just send them the link and it's done, and then they can get in. Other ways, I'm sure you've seen on the Canadian Shield website that we do registration by, sorry, I'm just going to stop some videos here. One sec, sorry about that. We do registration on our website. So if you are really comfortable with your website and you know how to do registration on your website, you can do that as well. And that's a good way to do it. And then once they register, you send out the link via email. It's pretty simple. It just depends on the comfort level, really, of the people who are attending. It's up to you.
And I will mention, Sue, that it is an added security measure. So if you are dealing with some contentious issues that you're concerned maybe around having that public link and you want to have a more secure link, because with registration every participant receives an individualized link that they can't share and pass around, then that becomes, it's just an added security feature.
So you protect that link at all costs, right? So you're not going to put I've seen this before, but you're not going to put any kind of link on Facebook or on a website or anywhere public where people can get at it who aren't in like a closed group. That's the most important. So security settings. Let's just talk about some security settings. If you have any other questions about registration in Zoom, I can definitely answer those questions during the question period. So let's move on here to security settings within the meeting. So as the host, I have the accessibility and only the host. There's only one host that's allowed, and they have the security settings within the meeting. So I have the option of locking this meeting that doesn't allow anyone else to come in. I can hide profile pictures. So if people are not presenting, I can turn them off if it's a distraction. I can give people in the participants the ability to screen share. I can give them the ability to chat, rename themselves, unmute themselves, or start their video. If we have an issue, which we did actually have in another event where we had to remove a participant, the host has the ability to eject someone from the meeting. Okay, so let's see here. Security meeting stream. All right, so for added security, so when all of you joined this meeting today, Melody and I saw the people who were coming on, and for the most part, we knew exactly who those people were. So for security reasons, it's really a good idea once we start talking about the roles of people in your congregational meeting. One of the roles will be to have someone who will be screening the people in the waiting room. So it's a good idea that whoever that person is going to be really familiar with everyone who will be joining your meeting. So if you get someone who you're not really sure who they are, you can ask that person and they'll be able to let them in. Okay, so I think that's it for this, Melody. I'm going to stop my spotlight and I'm going to spotlight you.
And hopefully you're going back to the slide.
I'm going to go back to the slide.
Yay. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to prepare for an annual congregational meeting that's on Zoom rather than on the regular, like a regular annual meeting, which in and of itself, the in-person annual meeting generally does take, some preparation to start with. So the first thing that you would do for any meeting is to create the agenda. So what is it that you're going to be addressing? And, take a look at it strategically. Who is going to do what, when? Who are the roles? So we have a chair. Do we have a chair lined up? Is that somebody that needs to be elected during the meeting? Do we have someone that's volunteering, and specifically for a Zoom meeting? Do we have some volunteers that are able, technically savvy, and that are able to host and co-host the meeting? Can do some of those things that Sue's already talked about around security, screening people, even with taking a look at the chat box. And once you have an understanding of what needs to happen in the meeting, just as you would create an agenda for an in-person meeting, take a look at that agenda and start to develop a technical script. So a technical script for a Zoom meeting might include notations around who needs to be spotlighted when. Who needs to have access to screen sharing, and what would they be needing to share? A PowerPoint or maybe a video? What are the related documents that need to be produced? And how are you going to manage your participants, and who's going to be responsible for those things? Sometimes it can be even quite effectual. We've done this a number of times for our own general meetings at the region, and prior to that, the conference. We have a full verbal script laid out for the chair, so that the chair is comfortable in managing the meeting and has an understanding of what needs to happen. The more details that you are able to gather related to the presentations, videos, documents, the more prepared you're going to feel going into that. And once you have a technical script, rehearse with your technical team, rehearse with the leadership, practice, play, see what happens. Make sure you have all those pieces around. Your Zoom is up to date. You've done your updates. You're feeling comfortable practicing and playing in the accounts. And then get on to a practice, a rehearsal, maybe 2 rehearsals. Practice with a team what it's going to look like. Make sure that just as you would with an in-person meeting that you have all the documents available in advance. Many times I've attended annual meetings and the annual report is handed out during the meeting, which happens, and I get that. And because we have the ability to sit maybe over lunch and digest that annual report before going into the in-person meeting following the service. But in this case, you won't have the capacity to allow people to, kind of digest that information prior to the Zoom meeting. So you want to make sure that those documents are readily accessible before the meeting, so that if people have questions or if there's going to be any kind of conversation, any kind of consensus building, that these things that you're prepared for them within the structure of the technology. You should really create a backup of material, and we've encountered this. I can't even tell you how many times when I'm facilitating a webinar that I try to make sure that I have about 3 different fail safes. Where's my PowerPoint? Is it in this place? Is it in this place? And is it accessible in another place? If I'm sharing with another person, does everybody know where to find the videos and that the videos actually work? Do we have like a backup cache in case somebody's laptop, dies right before the meeting? Do we have a secondary hardware? These are really important sort of fail safes to keep in mind. And if you want to have a smooth meeting, make sure you have a place where those materials are. And then you have some of those more structural questions around how will you use the chat box? Is it a place for people to have conversations, side conversations, post their questions? Or are you going to use it for other things? Are you going to limit the chat box use to limit distraction? And will you use breakout rooms? In particular with annual meetings, if you have a presentation or you have a piece of education that you want people to follow up on, or you want to do some small group work, maybe ask a question and have people interact with each other in order to share their responses. A breakout group could work really well for you, but you have to kind of look at your agenda and see how the technology is going to suit what you want to have happen. So another note is that closed captioning is also available in Zoom. It's in part of those updates that have just recently occurred. So if you haven't updated Zoom for a bit, take a moment, do the update, and you'll see it in those settings that closed captioning is now available. The role can be designated by the host. So I'm just wondering, Sue, did I forget anything in that preparation for the meeting? Big thing I want to say is keep practicing, keep playing.
Yeah, I would only say you should try at all costs to be hardwired in.
Yes.
And by that, I mean, whatever device you're using, have a cord that attaches your device to your internet router.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi is not predictable. And you definitely, if you're having a full meeting, for example, I'm not at the lake right now. I'm here in the office because my Wi-Fi is not reliable. And to hold a meeting like this, I have to make sure that I've got reliable hardwired internet.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So thanks for sharing that, Sue. And that's why I'm uploading my cord. I made sure that I was plugged in hardwired before we started. So. So I think we're going to be moving on to the meeting roles and remembering too that using this technology, it's an extra layer of preparation. It's an extra layer of leadership and managing, just because we're still getting comfortable with this technology. And remember that in our preparation, in our rehearsals, that it's really important to practice patience with each other and with ourselves.
And Melody, I wonder if you could spotlight both of us.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
That way we
I can just remove spotlight is what I can do because I'm just a co-host. That's all I can do.
Oh, you can just remove. Okay. Yeah. So these are some of the things that we're learning that happen. So I think what I'll do, Melody, is I'm just going to put us both, and then that way we won't have to worry about this again. And George Bott is giggling. I know he is. Okay. So meeting roles. So in the meeting roles, many of you have seen this before, that there are hosts, there are hosts and co-hosts and participants, and these are some of the things that they can do. But for our purposes here today, I'm going to keep this slide up, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about the different kind of meeting roles within a congregational meeting when you're doing voting. Okay, and I just see someone's come into the room. Okay, so just a little note here that the meeting chair who leads the agenda and chairs the meeting is a separate role completely from the technical host. You only are allowed to have one host, and that host, that technical host, has the control of the entire meeting. And as you can see, there are some things that co-hosts can do, but there are some things that only the hosts can do. So you need to make sure that you have somebody else being the host of the actual technical part of this meeting. So when you see host, don't think it's the host of the meeting, but the chair, it's got to be someone separate. So the meeting technical host is someone who opens the meeting, can turn on the recording, creates co-hosts. So as I started this meeting, I made Melody into a co-host. We can share presentation slides, and we found it really helpful to have an additional co-host who's responsible for sharing all the videos separately. When you have a large-scale meeting, as I learned with Shining Waters and Canadian Shield, we needed 3 or 4 people to run the tech alone. It's a big job when you have the bigger the meeting, so you definitely need to make sure that you've got extra helpers. Spotlighting speakers. So if you noticed, I went in and made Melody and myself spotlighters. We spotlight our video. So a way to do that is you can go either to the participants panel and go next to the person's name, highlight over it, and it'll say more, and it'll say spotlight. And then what will happen is that person who's speaking is spotlighted for everyone, provided they have their view on speaker view. Okay, so that's something you control. I've talked about this before in other tutorials, where you control how you see things on the screen, unless we lock the computer for you to see that. But otherwise, you need to make sure it's in speaker view up at the top right corner. So if you take a peek up there after I stop sharing this video, you'll be able to see that. The technical meeting host sets up and manages breakout rooms. Co-hosts can manage the breakout rooms in the most recent upgrade of Zoom. So that's a plus for sure, because it was really hard to be the only one host to have to do everything that's going on. The technical meeting host is the only one who designates a closed captioner if that's something that you're using. We can manage security like chats, sharing permissions, about muting, that kind of thing. And the technical host, that, Oz behind the curtains person, they're going to give instructions if it's required of participants, such as, so-and-so, would you please unmute your speaker, turn on your camera, that kind of thing. And we turn on the live stream as well. So co-host roles, these roles can be combined, but unless people are really familiar with Zoom, we recommend only one person in the host role and one person who really knows what they're doing here. So greeter, waiting room, email help related to meeting entry. So you're going to have a co-host who pays attention to the waiting room, like I mentioned before, and they're going to make sure that they are the gatekeeper. They're going to let people in and out, and they're going to give instructions to those people. You have a choice. I don't know that oh, you can't see it now. Sorry. I was going to just show you something, but there's nobody in the waiting room. You can give people instructions. If they're sitting in the waiting room, there's a way when you're a co-host or a host, it'll show the person for waiting room, and you can admit all or just admit one, and you can give a message to the entire, not just one person, the entire waiting room. Something like, the meeting will start in 5 minutes. Thank you for your patience, or whatever you want to say. Okay, so you want to have a co-host that's going to manage the participants. Now, this is a key thing. Someone who's going to change the phone in, change people's names. So here, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I don't think that we have done this before, so let me share my screen. And if you take a look here, Peter Hartmans, I'm going to pick on you, and I'm going to change your name. So what I did was, I'm just going to show you quickly again. You have a choice. You can go here to his picture, at the 3 dots, and you can press the button, and you see all these things you can do, and you can press rename. And you can do this yourself, or you can do it as a co-host. So, Mr. Moo, I'll just call you that. So now it's going to say Mr. Moo, and that's how it'll change, right? So let's say that Peter Hartman's came on as this. So he's a phone number, and over on the participants window, instead of a letter for the initials of his or her name, it's going to have a telephone, and the telephone people in your participants list are all going to be at the bottom right here. So this is where, as a co-host, you're going to say, this is, at the beginning of the meeting before it starts, this co-host is going to say, there's someone with the name, with the phone number 705-474-3350. Would you please unmute yourself and tell me your first name and your last name? And so then Peter Hartmans would turn that off, and he would say, hi, my name is Peter Hartmans. And then I would type that in. I say, oh, thank you, Peter, and press OK. And then he'll still have the icon on the telephone at the bottom, but you'll at least see his name, because there's nothing worse than, having a phone number and not knowing who's in the meeting and who you're talking to. Okay, so that's pretty important. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run over here and show you this page, which we have on the website under here, where it talks about hosting roles. Okay, so here it is. So these are the people that we're going to have here. You're going to have the technical host. You're going to have the greeter that I just talked about. They're going to monitor the room. They're going to rename the participants. If this person's available, you want them to be available for one-on-one offline support. So you might even want to have a third person. We had, like I said, we had 4 people running within the meeting, but then we had 2 people dealing with registration and people who couldn't get into the meeting. So as a host, there's no way that I can talk to someone who is having trouble getting into a meeting. I am so busy running things within the meeting that if it's like, say your meeting started at 6:30 and they came in at 6:35, but they're having trouble, the way that we worked around that was to have an extra person, and we sent out an email before the meeting, and we said, hey, if you're having trouble, you're going to call Donna Roots, and here's her email, and here's her phone number, and she's going to help you get into the meeting if you're having trouble. So I highly recommend that you have that troubleshooting person or persons to get that going. Presentation support, like I said, another person to help with screen share. It frees up the host to do other things. There were times when the closed captioner came in on a large regional meeting, and I was the only person who had the control to switch them out and to change the closed captioning person. And I was busy, I think I was showing a video, so I couldn't do it. So we learned very quickly that you want to have somebody else doing slides or videos. Very important. Now we're going to talk about voting in a minute, but you definitely want to have 1 or 2 people who are the scrutineers who will count the voting. So 1 person for each voting channel that uses yes, no buttons, chat, email. We're going to explain that, and we have a video for you that will show it in action. So we'll explain that more in a minute. Procedural support. So you designate a person for procedural questions. So at our Canadian Shield meeting that we held, I think we had Lillian as our procedural person. So if there are any questions that came up with regard to procedure and policies, she was the person, and she would chat with whoever needed help. We didn't have any issues, so that's good. And if you're really brave, live stream host. So you can live stream your meeting, and we did that, and it was fun. I learned a lot, but I have a lot more to learn about that. So that's something that you can do as well. So this is the hosting roles for a Zoom, say a congregational meeting or any kind of meeting. It's all here, like I said, within these tip sheets on our website, and please check them out because they will help you. And anything that we've sort of covered over, because we can't do too much tonight, it'll be all scripted for you there. Okay,
So Sue was talking about all of those different roles that co-hosts can play within the Zoom meeting. And one of those roles is around scrutiny, and we're going to be addressing and taking a look now at the different forms of voting. So we're going to start with some questions to consider. Again, this is where you have to take a look at what you actually want to do with your meeting. What is the agenda of your meeting? So it's in the next place there. Consider the questions. And so the question is, what actually needs to happen? Are there preliminary motions that are required? Is there going to be more than one person on a device? So for example, if you have a couple sharing a computer at home, do you have some way of managing their voting as separate entities? We'll talk a little bit about that. Will you have people attending by phone? And if you do, there's some protocols that you'll have to consider around how you can include people on the phone in their voting. Whenever you go through that agenda and you think about your context and you think about the participants, when you've determined your needs, I really encourage you to develop clear, concrete, and consistent voting practices that are going to work for your context. And we're going to go through a variety of different voting tools and reaction tools, but keep in mind they kind of go from simple to more advanced, and they're going to be meeting different needs within the congregational meeting. So I'd invite you again to take a look at the document that the United Church of Canada has produced, that governance in congregations during COVID-19. I posted the website link in the chat box for more information and considerations around meeting requirements. So how are you going to meet those requirements through Zoom? So vitally important that once you've determined those needs, practice, develop those clear instructions, decide the features that you're going to use, and write out the instructions and take time in the meeting to go through them. And you may want to set up an orientation prior to the meeting before the meeting, to get people kind of trained and comfortable using whatever voting tool you're going to use. I would say be very, very cautious about using multiple tools. You want to see one consistent way of voting. It may be different from meeting to meeting, but in this particular meeting, we're going to do it this way, and we're going to ask the question this way. We're going to invite your responses this way every time throughout this meeting. And be cautious about using lots of different tools to do the same thing. So, for example, we're going to take a look at those responses, the yes, no button, and raising your hands. And I'm going to say, and this is definitely through experience. I facilitated a congregational meeting this summer where I said, oh, everybody can just raise their hand so I can count. And that doesn't work. If you're going to use them, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but raising your hand really only works to signal the participants need to speak. There's a question or a comment. I would not use that as a voting tool. So we're going to move into some simple ways to vote. And we're going here next. This is my, back it up, back one, Sue, thank you. So yays and nays, but flip them around. This is something that I've thought of as kind of negative voting, and we've used this most recently in the Manitou Intentional Learning Community annual meeting in November, and it comes to us, it came to me actually, it was introduced to me with a colleague who works at Laurentian University and is part of Laurentian Senate. And when they have questions on the floor that are non-critical, that are consensus, that they're not expecting debate, and they're not expecting a close vote, what they do is they flip the script. And this worked beautifully in this annual meeting that I was part of, where instead of asking for the yays to the question, they ask for the dissent. So instead of asking for the assent, they ask for the dissent first. So flip that script and ask for the nay before you ask for the yay. Because you may have nobody dissenting, and if that's it, and maybe no one who is going to be what's the word? Help me, Sue. not voting, like what's the word? I've just blanked on it. Abstain. Thanks, Lisa. No, if you have no abstentions, you have no dissensions, then the motion will pass without having everybody having to record a vote. Does that make sense for folks? So ask for the yays before you ask. So ask for the nays before you ask for the yays. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it.
Yeah. So call on the no vote first to see if the motion is defeated or carried. So we're going to move now to those nonverbal responses. Now, sometimes it can be difficult for a leader while they're in a meeting, or facilitator while you're in a meeting, to gauge what participants are thinking, especially if we have mics off and cameras off. And sometimes it can be hard as a participant in a meeting to let the chair know what's happening and how you want to respond. So in the one of the most recent updates, Zoom has increased their nonverbal responses. If you take a look at the ribbon at the bottom of your screen as a participant, you'll see a smiley face with reactions written on it. It's at the far right of the screen, not at the leave button, before you get to the leave button. And then the reactions, you can see here, I've got a little picture. You've got some options. You can raise your hand, you can click yes, you can click no. You can indicate go slower, go faster, and there's a few other emoticons that are available. The thumbs up, thumbs down, applause, because who doesn't like to be cheered on? The coffee mug is to signify we need a break. And the clock is to say, let's get things moving on. Wrap it up.
So I don't want people, if I can just interrupt for one moment. I'm just going to share, because I know that there are people who are going to be confused by this. We have been saying, always go to the participants panel. And unfortunately, what happens, I'll just share my screen with you. When I go to the participants panel, they disappeared. So if you see all those, they all disappeared with this new update. So what Melody was saying is down at the bottom here, the reactions with the smiley face. Now that I've stopped sharing, you might be able to check yourself. Oh no, I'm still sharing, excuse me. So the reactions, take a look. That's where you raise your hand. That's where you say yes or no. That's where you can say, hey, it's time to party. So yeah, we just found this out before we started this.
Yeah. So for simple votes, and what happens is Zoom will tally the yes and the no's. So for simple votes, where there's, again, not going to be a lot of debate or contention, you may want to use those yes and no buttons as tools to vote. The problem is that now they're in the reaction panel. They don't last very long. They don't stay there so you can count them. So I'm just going to invite folks, as you feel comfortable, I'm going to ask a silly question right now. Do you like peanut butter sandwiches? If you like peanut butter sandwiches, please go to your reactions panel and click yes. If you do not like peanut butter sandwiches, please press the no button. Let's try that now.
I'm just going to share my screen while this is happening, Melody, so people can see how it tallies. So unlike before, this update I did this afternoon, the yes and no's stayed there until the host cleared the board. Thanks for the heart, Lori. Thanks for the thumbs up, Marianne. Thanks for the thumbs up.
You see all those. You see them in the participant panel, yeah.
But we see what Ted McPherson has done. We see that Ted McPherson has his hand up. And what happens is when you have your hand up, it doesn't disappear, which is a good thing for the hosts. And now if you take a look at the top of my screen, am I sharing right now? Yes, I am. Mm-hmm. Ted moves right over here to the very front. So I can see that he has his hand up and he jumps to the top of the participant panel. So right away, then Melody could say to Ted.
Yes, do you have a question, Ted?
Please
Would you
turn
like
off.
to unmute and turn your camera on, please?
I pressed the wrong button.
So Ted,
Ted can turn, he could put down his hand himself, or I used to be able to clear
you can
all,
still do it, Sue. Yeah.
lower all hands. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what this is. And again, like I said, we are learning every day. This just happened today. Melanie and I just did the update and we're going on the fly right now. This just happened. So the way that you lower his hand is you just press that and it's done.
So I'm going to ask the question again, because now we see the host sees the participant panel. Can you go back to sharing again so we can see people do it? Yeah.
Sure.
And I'm going to ask the question again, and you'll notice there's not a lot of time before those yeses and nos disappear. And it's really important for people to be able to find the reaction button and say yes. So if you like peanut butter sandwiches, please click yes now. So I see at the bottom of that participant panel, 15 people, 16 people, 17, 18 people like peanut butter sandwiches, but now they disappear.
Yeah, I hope that they change that. I'm sure
there's a little bit of lobbying.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll change, and that people will say we couldn't take the count in enough time. And if you notice that some people pushed yes before the question was asked, it's important as a host in your congregational meeting to say, like the chair, to say, please don't press the button until I've asked the question and I tell you to press the button now. Yeah. Do you like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? Press yes if you do, and no if you don't. Please vote now. And then you press the button, and that way you can catch all the people. Work around, I guess, until we figure out the change.
So let's try with the no's. Here's the question. If you do not like peanut butter sandwiches, please locate your no button and press the no button now. So now we have 13.
So there's the tally,
right? There's the tally
13 people
at the bottom. 13 people do not like peanut butter sandwiches, and then they disappear. So that's how you're going to do your simple yes and no questions, your simple yes and no voting. I only get a thumbs up, no, yes, or no. And this is a question from John Harmony. So the question there is, have you done an update? So I would start with taking a look to see if you've got an update on Zoom to do. Sounds like you're using an older version because they have expanded that, that reaction panel.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move to voting by phone. And this one's a little more of a challenge. I hope they haven't changed too much about this one. And again, voting by phone, Sue and I had quite a long conversation about this, whether this is even accessible. Telephone is accessible, and it all depends on your account level. Now, you'll notice that when we do regional events, there is there's local numbers and 1-800 numbers, and that's because the toll-free number is furnished through the United Church of Canada to the regions, and that's the level of accounts that we have with Zoom. Not all Zoom accounts have a toll-free number. They do have local numbers to call. And so if you have a participant that wants to be part of things and needs to call in, the question is, can they access those local numbers? And of course, we've had situations where people have tried to call those local numbers and they run up, quite large long distance bills if they don't have a long distance plan. So I'll reiterate, if you are using a local number, it's not local to us in Northern Ontario. Could be local to people in Toronto, but not us in Northern Ontario. So you would need to have something like a long distance plan that would allow for, free long distance within Ontario or within Canada. So I'll just raise that with folks. Please check your Zoom account to see what telephone numbers you have accessible to you if people want to call into the meeting. If people are calling into the meeting, I will just remind folks to rename those telephone numbers if you're the host or if they're calling in. It has to be the host at that stage that would rename them away from the telephone number that's posted into their name so people can see who that are. And if you are facilitating a vote and there are people by phone, you have to do a separate vote for the people on the phone. So the question would be asked to the participants on Zoom, the digital participants, and then the question would be asked again to those folks on the telephone. If you press *9, that check mark appears on the participants panel next to the telephone. So you would ask, do you agree with the motion? Please press *9, and you'd wait for the people to do that. Do you disagree? Please press *9. You wait to count the tally on that vote. And do you abstain? Press the tally. So you have to slow down the voting for people on the telephone. You have to give them the opportunity to press *9 each time. I'm just taking a look to see if there's any other things in the how to vote section here. We've done, I mentioned renaming. We're talking about the telephone. But renaming also comes into play if you have multiple people on a single device and you need to count those votes. Yes, it does. So just as a question, Nancy Ferguson just asked, does the participants panel show the tally of the telephone vote on the participants panel? Yes, it does, for that *9. That's the indicator to the participants panel. You'll see a notification.
Yes. So basically, when you're on the phone, there are only two things that you can do on your telephone while you're in a Zoom meeting. *6 mutes yourself, which is it mutes and unmutes. So you'll do that the minute you come on the meeting. And *9 is raise your hand. So what happens is, just like what we saw with Ted when he lifted his hand, he went all the way to the top of the list, and it tallied the number of hands at the bottom. So what you do is, when you ask those questions of the people on the telephone, which we'll get into in a minute, you're just talking to the people on the telephone, and they can only raise their hand, and then we as hosts and co-hosts can only put down their hand for them.
Yes. But we can also count the tally.
And we count the tally, just the same as if it was someone on a computer who pressed yes or no.
Yeah. So coming back to the renaming, this is important again for multiple people on a single device, because if you need to count their vote, and you also want to make sure that you know that there are two votes that you're counting rather than one. Now the question is, if there are two people on a single device, how will you? First of all, you have to have them. Instead of if for example, my husband Chris was sharing the video with me today, and we were both going to be participating in the meeting, I would rename myself Melody and Chris Duncanson Hales, so you'd know that there's two people. Some places you might have the name with the numeral 2 in front of it, or if there's 3 people at a single place, 3 people, so you can kind of make sure you're keeping track of that tally based on those numbers. If you put a number beside your name, it goes to the top of the participants list. So that it changes places in the participants. I think it goes to the top, doesn't it, Sue? If you go 1, Sue, 2, Melody and Chris, 3, I don't know, Bob and Doug and Jim. It'll change its position on the participants list, so you can see and track that.
If I could just interject one thing,
yeah.
If there are people, which there will be people who don't vote or aren't allowed to vote or whatever the case is, you could ask them when they start the meeting to put the letter Z in front of their name, and it automatically moves them to the bottom of the list, and it just makes it easier for the scrutineers who are counting, and it makes it clear that they're not supposed to be voting, just in case they push a button by accident.
Yeah. If there's that's when we would using that renaming tool, you would rename observers, for example, or guests, to put Z in front of their name, so they wouldn't necessarily be included in the tally. If you have multiple people on a single device, you may invite one person consistently to use those yes/no buttons, and the second person to put their vote into a private chat to one of the scrutineers. And that's the method that we used at the general meeting with the region. So you have to have sort of maybe a side tool so that you can have each person having a vote and not always voting the same, if that makes sense for folks. You want to have people to have the agency to have a differing vote from the other person sharing the computer with them or the device with them.
So the Canadian Shield meeting was recorded and it's on our YouTube channel, and we will put that in the chat at some point, and you can take a look and just fast forward it to the voting parts, and you'll see how we had Melody and Rob Smith and Kathy Smith and Peter. There were all of them on the screen at the same time, and there was all kinds of stuff happening in the background, because there were some people who were on the phone and or for whatever reason they couldn't vote. And so they were getting emails. So we had emails that were coming, and then the scrutineers were getting it that way. So there are a lot of moving parts. Yeah.
But again, try not, you want to take a look at what is necessary, and you want to aim for simplicity.
Oh yeah.
So we were dealing with a regional meeting of over 100 people. You might be looking at an annual meeting with maybe 20 or 30 people, and so the easiest way, the most simple way is the way you want to go. But do keep in mind that you will probably run into the situation of multiple people using a single device. And so you may say right up the front that it has to be, and I know that other leaders have said this with their general meetings, their workaround is just to say, make it clear, one person to one device, period. So if you're in a house, one person's on the computer, the other person's on the iPad, or the other person's on a phone or something else. Okay, that is kind of simple. So we're moving to more complicated, and this is just to let folks know in terms of using polls. Polls will be used in place of a secret ballot. If you had to move to a secret ballot in your annual meeting, this is where polls come in. So I'll let Sue take this part away.
Okay, so I'm just going to stop here and I'm going to share my screen. So if you take a look here, this is what the hosts have only. So the polls are at the bottom, and you can see that there are no polls listed here. So let's say I want to add a question and I want to do this on the fly. There are two ways to do this. You can do it in the meeting right away, or you can go into the back end. So let's say I want to edit this, and it's going to bring me into my, oh, what happened here? There we go. So it brings me into my email. So I'm actually going to, oops, get out of there. I'm going to go back to up here where I already have it open. So let's say I want to start meetings up ahead of time. So here we go. Here's our test meeting that we had before. I'm going to go over here and press edit. And I take a look, and if there's anything here I want to change, no, I'm good. And then I go all the way to the bottom, and you see the word poll. So you click on this, and it says, you have not created any poll yet. Well, I want to ask some questions. So let's say I'm going to have a title, sandwich poll. So that's the name of my poll. And the question is, do you like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? Question mark. Okay. So I can have a single answer or multiple choice. Yes, no, only on Sundays. Okay. I go down to the bottom and I press save. So in this meeting, which is the test meeting that we did, that poll is there. There's the question, poll sandwich. I can edit it, I can delete it, I can do whatever I want with it. So let's do a poll in this meeting right now. So I'm going to go into the back end here the way I am. Here's the meeting we're in right now. You can see it's being recorded. I'm not going to join it. I'm not going to edit it, or excuse me, end it. I'm going to edit it. Make sure you don't press end. I've done that before, and I've ended a whole meeting. Just be really careful. So you come in here and you go down to the bottom and you press save. And I'm going to go down here to poll, and it says, again, you have not created a poll. So I'm going to poll for tutorial. And that's the title of my poll. And I'm going to say the motion reads, do you like winter? So I'm going to have a multiple choice answer here. So we're going to say yes, no, abstain. Okay, so those are the only answers that I want to know. That's like, I want to know this answer. It's our motion, and I'm going to save it.
Before you save it,
I was
sorry,
going to mention, edit,
Sue, if you can go back to that poll, I noticed underneath there's a checkbox for anonymous. So can we, if we do it anonymous,
sure,
that means that that's the secret ballot portion.
Yes.
Correct. So if you needed to record a secret ballot, if you press anonymous, people can't see the vote.
Right.
Or who's voting what. So just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah. So here's another question. Should Melody dye her hair purple? I can't spell purple. Yes, no, abstain. Okay.
Or spell it D-Y-E. Thanks, Nancy.
Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry, thanks, Nancy. Oh, Nancy. What would I do without Nancy Ferguson? She is my savior. Okay, save. I'm a little tired. It's almost 8 o'clock. Okay, so there is our poll with 2 questions. So now I'm going to stop share. Excuse me, no, I'm going to go into my Zoom meeting here. So here you can see my screen. And let me just get rid of my participants and chat window just so it's not as messy there. Okay, so here's poll. So as the person who's the host, I'm the only one who can launch this poll. So I'm now going to click on poll, and I really, yeah, so I see, you can see what I see. So here it is, there's the question, there are the answers, here's the second question, here are the answers, and then I would launch the poll. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to launch the poll, and then you will see as a participant that there is a poll there for you to answer, and you click yes, no, abstain, yes, no, abstain. And as you do that, I'm watching the percentages go up and down. They're saying 22 out of the 39 people on this meeting have voted. 28 people, 30 people. Okay, it's going up, it's going up. 31 people. So you just wait a little bit, and it gives a timer that goes up. So there are 7 people, excuse me, 8 people. Oh, here we go. Still going, 35 of 39. And it gives a running clock at the top. So I've had this open for 48 seconds. And so I'll probably leave it open for a minute or two, just in case those last 3 people just don't know what to push, or whatever the case is. So that's 1 minute. So I'm going to end the poll. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I just want you to be able to see this. So this is what I see while you were voting. And then I'm going to click this to say end the poll, and I get the results. Here's how many said yes, how many said no, how many abstained to the first question, etc., etc. Okay, so I have the choice to relaunch the poll. Let's say it didn't go well and people, whatever, for whatever reason you want to relaunch it, you can. And then I have the choice to share the results. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to share the results. So you should now see all the results of the poll. So let's say you want to choose this way to do your motions. You totally can. There's no reason why you can't use polls. And Melody,
and I'm not going to dye my hair purple. So
like your shirt, girl. Yes, you
are. Hairdressers are closed. Can't go. We're in lockdown.
That's right. Oh well, I guess
not happening.
So that's polls. So I guess we're on to the voting example. So let me come back here. Melody, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. What to do on meeting day? Is that where we're moving to next?
No, I think we are showing the voting example.
Oh, showing voting example, yeah, okay.
Evaluation and experience have shown that the agendas of meetings of the Regional Council are full. and that time for fulsome discernment and discussion of important items is occasionally lacking. A consent agenda is a tool to help the Regional Council focus on what is most important. Proposals which are routine or non-controversial actions or routine changes in policy or procedure are included in the consent agenda. The consent and procedural motions which form our consent agenda are found on our website at the link posted in the chat box. You have all had an opportunity to review the consent agenda prior to this meeting. Please indicate in the chat to Jody if you wish to have an item removed from the consent agenda to be placed on the meeting's agenda. If any 5 voting members so request, an item will be moved.
So this is where we did a little bit of
indication.
Thank you. As there is no wish to move an item, we will continue without discussion, and the consent agenda is ready for a vote.
So if anyone had an agenda item, they would be, they were emailing Jody directly. They were sending her a Zoom private message to her directly, and that's how she found out and reported.
It is moved by Peter Hartmans and seconded by Kirsty Hunter that the consent agenda be adopted. As we have practiced, those voting on a computer, please open your participants list and use the voting buttons to vote yes or no. If 2 people are on one computer, one person should use the voting buttons and the other one type yes or no into the chat to Jody. And those who wish to abstain, please type the word abstain into the chat to Jody. Please vote now.
So David was chairing the meeting, and Jody was one of those co-hosts that we were talking about who was giving him information, and she was part of the scrutineer team.
Those votes are counted.
Thank you. For those voting by telephone, if you are voting yes, please press *9 now.
Those votes are counted.
Thank you. For those voting by telephone, if you are voting no, please press *9 now.
Those votes are counted.
Thank you. And for those voting by telephone, if you wish to abstain, please press *9 now.
Those votes are counted. The vote is 87 for, 0 against, 2 abstain.
Thank you. So the motion carries and all items on the consent agenda are adopted.
Okay, so if you noticed, this was David. David is the chair of the Shining Waters Regional Council, and if you noticed, his pace was very, very slow. Just remember, when you're on the computer, you have to go very slowly because people hear what you say, and if there's a lag, then they have to wait for that message to come, and then in their brain it tells them, okay, so now I have to go press yes or no. So you just have to always remember, take your time. Don't rush through it. and it'll be successful for sure.
Yeah, and I just recall, like, looking at that particular vote, go back to that very first suggestion that I made. They had 87 for, 0 against. So if they had flipped the script and asked for the against vote, they would have known that they carried unless 87 people abstained, right? So, so they could have done that in a different order, and you could have seen the results in a different way.
So here's our last piece where we're just talking about the meeting day. I see we're getting close to the order of the day here, so I'll try to zip through this as quickly as I can. And again, everything that Melody and I are talking about are on the website in those tip sheets, okay? So on your meeting day, you want to open the meeting early for co-hosts and presenters. So for example, Melody and I were in this room at 6 o'clock, even though this meeting didn't start until 6:30. So you definitely want to get here early and make sure that the hosts, co-hosts, and everyone are here and ready. Rather than opening an informal reception time where people can talk, it's simpler to just leave people in the waiting room until 5 minutes before you start. It's very chaotic if you've got more than 3 people talking on Zoom at once, even 2 people talking. You can see, you know, if Melody and I are talking at the same time, it's a little bit difficult. So you definitely want to make sure that before the meeting starts, you send an email to say, please make sure that your microphone is muted, that your camera is off, and that we'll have social time or coffee time after. We can break out into breakout rooms, perhaps, let's say. So it's just simpler to leave people in the waiting room until 5 minutes before. You can share a welcome slide when people are waiting to be brought in. Keep all the microphones muted upon arrival and ask them to turn off their cameras. And if people don't do that or don't get that message, that's where your co-hosts can go into the participants panel and do it for them. You could admit everyone into the waiting room at once if you choose, or you can go person by person. So for example, if you're in a situation where there are some people who have to stay in the waiting room and you want other people in the meeting, say you're doing interviews or you're doing something else, or it's a situation like this where you've got a meeting and you need the congregants to stay in the waiting room, you just leave them in there and then you can put them all in, or you can do it one by one. It'll just take longer if you do it one by one if you have a lot of people. So at the beginning of your congregational meeting, you want to get someone who is an MC, right? So you get someone who can welcome everyone, take a few minutes to review the Zoom screen, the Zoom toolbar at the bottom, in particular the features that you're going to be using in this meeting that you're having. Adapt the sample, the detailed script. So also what we've added are scripts. The reason why the Canadian Shield and the Shining Waters Regional Council meetings went so smoothly was because we all worked from scripts, written papers that we followed, and it helped immensely. It just have a script ready. It really, really helps. So let's see, you're going to have key points. You're going to keep your microphones muted, videos off. You need to talk to people how the chat's going to be used. We haven't talked about that. I mean, Melody touched on it at the beginning, and I haven't changed this chat settings, but you can change. And I did this in the regional council meeting where people could only chat with the hosts or co-hosts. They were not allowed to chat privately with each other, or you can turn the chat function off completely. I don't think there's ever been a case, Melody, has there, that we've actually had to turn the chat function off completely? Like, I don't know when you'd ever do that. Yeah. So that's an option.
Chat function can often be really, really helpful.
Oh, yeah. At the very beginning, have this MC person review the voting, speaking points of order procedures. So if you have a point of order, have someone type it into the chat box, and then your point of order person is going to deal with that. And then, of course, talk about how to participate on the phone by pressing *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. So let people know, this is important, that there's a member of your team, your church team, who's going to be available in private chat for any kind of issues in Zoom. So if you have if you have someone who has questions and they can't figure something out, you don't want a meeting that's already started. You don't want it to be stalled in any way. So you want to keep going with your agenda. Have someone be designated as the questions person, and just let them know that anyone who has questions who's participating, they can send a private chat and show them how to do it to that person. I think that's it for me. There's something in the chat. Do we have questions?
So we do have a few questions, but I'll invite folks. We've covered a lot of ground tonight. Again, this is all recorded, so it'll be up again on the Canadian Shield website shortly. But and we are a little bit past the order of the evening tonight. But if you do, this is an important time. If you have questions, you might want to practice raising your hand, or you might want to put it into the chat box now. We have had a couple of questions. One, and we've been addressing them as we've gone along as well. One person was wondering about how to put those motions. She saw that when the video that there was a motion was written out and it was on a slide. And that was only using a PowerPoint, your regular PowerPoint program, and using, putting the motion on the slide and then screen sharing. So if you're a host, you can screen share PowerPoints, just like we've been doing tonight. You've seen the PowerPoints that we prepared. And you can use those PowerPoints to show motions, and if you have those prepared. Another person was asking if there's a limitation of any kind to Zoom accounts. Is it a best practice for one pastoral church to have one Zoom account? People have been, in particular, since the rise of the pandemic, and as people have been forced in their homes, lots of people have their own private accounts. And some congregations have multiple accounts. I know in the region we have multiple accounts based on our staffing needs. So that way both, all three of us on staff with Sue and Rob and myself, we can be hosting simultaneous Zoom meetings depending on our staffing meetings. So
if I could just say something, yeah. Melody. So something happened here. Someone sent me a private message while I was hosting. I didn't even see it. So that's a perfect example right there. So thank you, Cindy Bramley. Cindy sent me a private message asking questions. Our vote results recorded for later so that scrutineers can make sure that a vote is not counted twice, as someone in the chat, someone sent in the chat. Yeah. So the answer to that question is, if you're voting by poll, yes, it's all recorded. You can see who answered what, unless you press the anonymous one. But the host can see who answered which questions and what their answer was. So yes, you can go back into your settings, back into that meeting, and you can see those answers, and you can export it, no problem. But that highlights exactly why you need to have someone for just questions such as this. So either you allow people to ask questions openly to everyone in the chat, or you designate someone that is going to be getting private messages. But a host, you can't do, you're too busy being Oz behind the curtains and moving this and moving that, and there's no way that I could have I didn't have time to look at the chat. So that's why Melody was doing that, but because it was sent privately to me, I didn't see it. So that's a perfect example. Yeah, so thanks, Cindy.
So just as we're ready to close, there's lots of thank yous, which is great. And I want to extend our gratitude to you again for taking time tonight to join into this. And again, knowing that this information is available to you. And if we move to the next slide, we've got our pictures with that feels like a long time ago. It was almost a year ago since I've had my haircut. So that's what it used to look like. Fantastic. Remember that, Sue? Yeah. So we have our contact information here on this slide. And we just invite you to visit the Canadian Shield website for this information. If you need to get in touch with either Sue or myself, Sue for some of that technical pieces, and myself if there's governance pieces and how that interplays with the technical, happy to give you a call on those things and to have a chat, exchange emails, let us know how we can help you. We're just going to move to our closing prayer this evening. And I'll just invite those that are still with us to take a breath. It feels like we went through this at a breathless pace. And I'll invite us into prayer using the words of a moderator, Richard Bott. Creator God, help us to reach out with our hearts when we can't touch with our hands. Help us to be socially connected when we have to be socially distant. Help us to love as perfectly as we can, knowing that perfect love casts out all fear. Amen. So our blessings on you this evening. And again, thank you so much for your participation tonight.